you want me to sit here?
Wherever you're comfortable.
Okay. Hello. Would you like me to read the first chapter? Or, like, I won't read the first chapter, but
It's
I
not
could read
long.
the first couple of pages,
Please.
just to introduce you to the piece. So,
I want to hear the first sentence.
So Eugene Doyle, born 19th of June 1972, died the 17th of December 2010, aged 38. Isabel Ann MacDonald, born the 24th of May 1974, died the 18th of December 2010, aged 36. Today is Christmas Eve. Today is my birthday. Today I am 15. Today I buried my parents in the backyard. Neither of them were beloved. Izzy called me Marnie after her mother. She's dead now. Actually, they're both dead. I'm just saying that's how I got it, my name. My mum had a boring name, didn't suit her at all. She was an Isabel called Izzy. She should have been a Charlie. I think of her as a Charlie. My dad had a gay name, Eugene. He never said he hated it, but I bet he did. Everyone called him Gene, but he was a bit of a Frankie, a Tommy, maybe a Mickey. My pal Kimberly gets called Kimbo. She's always getting into fights and would smack her own shadow if she thought she could catch it. Kimbo's name evolved from a slagging she got for being a total psycho, and it stuck like a warning. Here comes Kimbo, run for your life. My other pal is Susie. Her name's Suzanne, and for a long time that's what we called her. We never felt inclined to shorten it the way some people do with long names. But then when we were about 11 years old, she told us she didn't want to be called Suzanne anymore. She wanted to be called Susie. She thought it sounded older and sexier. I suppose it does. Of course, our granny still calls her Snoozy, mortifying baby name. Then there's my sister Helen. We call her Nellie. To be honest, I don't think she knows her name is Helen. She's been Nellie since she was a baby. Nellie would have been cooler, but she was like Dumbo when she was born, so Nellie was a perfect fit. Izzy said choosing my name was a nightmare. She wanted something different for me, something sophisticated that made people look twice at me, as if they'd missed something about me the first time they looked. And so she chose her mother's name. I understand Emma was also a hot favourite, so was Martha. But Jane didn't like Emma. He said it was a weak name. He didn't like Sam either because he got dumped by a Sam. He also knew a Siobhan who got smacked by a bus when she bent down to pick a fag end on the curbside. Jean's favourite was Elise because of a song by The Cure, but Izzy hated it. She was more of a New Order fan, and I understand Alicia was discussed. Izzy said I was tiny when I was born. A preemie rushed to the intensive care unit where I was kept in a plastic bubble for 9 weeks with Jean and Izzy peering at me through Perspex glass, the safest place I've ever been. Anyway, that's why I'm Marnie and not Eve or Prudence or Lucretia. I'm Marnie, too young to smoke, too young to drink, too young to fuck, but who would have stopped me? So that's the beginning of The Death of Bees and how I quickly introduced as many people as I could in about 400 words, which I hope I've done. But there are some other characters that pop up within the next 500 words. But I get everyone down mostly in the first 500 words, which I'm really glad about, because that would have been a lot of work otherwise. It's really hard when you introduce characters into a piece because you really have to, I feel you have to really, especially when you have a big world, you have to really bring everybody into the universe that you've written about and you've created. And so I was quite self-conscious actually when I was writing it. Like, it was really important to me to get everybody who belongs in that world up front, and this is who this is and this is who that is, and say as many things as I could about that person around the 3 or 4 sentences I gave them, and in some instances just 2 sentences, just to describe everything about that person really fast so that people got a sense of who that person was. I mean, even like saying like Izzy and Jean are dead, I'm already saying something about them by saying they weren't beloved, because you get a sense, okay, she doesn't really like her parents, but I'm saying something about their character already that I haven't even embroidered before I've even started the book. And then I talk about how they feel about their own names, and just by doing that there you're getting a sense of the people that they are. And that's why I had a big thing about like their names and the whole thing about who was called who and why they were called it. So that's why I did that. Has anyone read it?
I've read parts of it.
Were you not reading I did before?
Yes, but I was late and I didn't hear you read. I heard you ask questions based on people who had read the book and knew what they were. I had no idea what the questions nor the answers were about.
Okay. You've come a long way.
Well,
It's
this is
very
actually,
nice to see you. It's very nice to
I
see you.
asked you if you were going to appear at any other place local, and you said you didn't know, but luckily I found out about this through one of our
Lucky for
local
me.
papers.
Lucky for me.
Yeah. But you've got a wonderful website, and you actually answer questions that people comment on your
Yeah,
website.
I like to respond to people fast because it's a good time for me right now because people are like reading the work and they're responding to it really like quickly and quite passionately as well. Whether they love it or whether they hate it. I mean, there was a guy who really hated it and threw my book at a wall. And I thought, well, it's not boring then because you did do something with it. But people are responding to it really well, and I'm really happy with that so far. Yeah.
What's the basis of the name, the title?
The Death of Bees. I had a really interesting conversation with a journalist recently, and I think, well, for me, The Death of Bees was, I went to a garden centre a long time ago, and I was buying lavender for my garden, and there was a woman there, and she was absolutely frantic about bees. She said, you know, you get your lavender and do not put it next to a doorway, because if you put it next to a doorway, loads of bees are going to come, and you're going to be irritated by bees all summer long. And I was like, okay, and that was enough for me, and you're about to walk away. And then she said, oh no, but wait, let me tell you something else about the bees. And she went on the biggest narrative you've ever heard about bees, and that they were coming extinct, that we were all going to die, and that we were all going to die. I was like, I just want to buy lavender. I just want to pay you and leave you as fast as I can. But you know, she really made an impact on me because like her fear and her anxiety like really made an impression on me. And when I was writing Nellie, I remembered that woman, and I kind of embroidered a little bit of that woman into Nellie. And Nellie has a moment in the book where she gets obsessed with the bees, and it really upsets her sister, Marnie. And basically when she's upset about the bees, she's actually talking about Jean and Izzy. She's not really upset about the bees. She's talking about her dead parents in the garden. They have planted lavender over those dead bodies. She could care less about, you know, the bees, but this is her focus because she has Asperger's. I'm talking about the bees. I'm worried about the bees. It's all about the bees. And her sister gets really upset and grabs her, and she says, I can't remember, she says, I don't give a fuck about the bees, stop going on about it, okay, stop mentioning it, stop talking about it, because Marnie doesn't want to discuss the bees either, because she knows what the bees are. And then a journalist interestingly said, you know, she said, you know, Jean and Izzy are the bees as well, but they're like a necessary thing in their lives. They're the parents of the children, but like bees, you know, you need them in the world to make the honey, but they're also very irritating, you need to get them away. And I thought, that's a very interesting thing to say. I'm going to bring that up at my next reading, which I'm doing now. So, you know, the bees that's what the bees were for me. These two annoying people, you know, deep in the ground, and they are, the title is like a metaphor for the kids, their guilt, you know, and basically about what they've done, and that's why I called it The Death of Bees. Jean and Izzy are the bees.
I think I got about 5% of that.
Did you get it?
I mean, is the book in your mind about fear and anxiety and obsession? And those are some of the things you were talking about earlier.
It's not about fear and anxiety, although there's obviously a lot of that evident in the book. It's about, for me, the book is about love, which people, you know, they're like, is there a lot of love in the book? And for me, there is love, because these girls are saved, and they're saved by the love that grows around them. And for me, it's about hope as well, because we're always rooting for the girls, and we always hope that things are going to turn out okay for them. It depends as a reader how you look at life and what you're going to focus on. I mean, some people like really focus on like political issues around the children and social issues around the children and negative issues around the children, but there's a lot of hope around them as well, and that's what saves them. I mean, for me, the book is also about judgment as well, you know, how quick we are to judge other people. And I wrote about a character called Lenny, who he goes into the park. He's an incredibly lonely person, and his partner has died. And he goes into the park and he seeks out a renter. And a renter is, I think, they're a male prostitute. So he goes into the park and he seeks out a renter. And this renter has been you know, given him the eye for a long time while he's been travelling through the park, and he's ignored this renter for a long time. But he becomes so incredibly lonely that he goes into the park one night and he sits on a swing, and just before anything happens, the police come, and the renter is actually a 15-year-old boy, and he doesn't get that, he didn't understand that. And as a result, Lenny ends up in a sex offenders register, and that's just his story. But he's also, he feels incredibly guilty and incredibly remorseful, and not just because he went off to the park to find a renter, because he feels he's betrayed his ex-partner, his dead partner, and he feels he has something to say now. He needs to make up for this, you know, error in judgment, and he looks at Marnie and Nellie and he thinks they're on their own. I need to take care of these kids, I need to, you know, step up to the plate. Where are their parents? And he becomes the love around their lives, he becomes family, and a sort of definitely a dysfunctional type of a family, but he becomes a family for these girls. And yeah, so for me, you know, there's judgment across the board. I mean, Vlado, for example, is a drug dealer. He's also a guy who's escaped a horrendous situation abroad. He is a refugee, and he has watched his family die, and he's watched his daughter be killed, and he's over in, you know, the UK, where, and I don't want to be controversial about it, but where they treat refugees really badly. They really do. They come over here from beautiful lands. I wrote that actual sentence in the book, and they're made to live in horrible situations, and they're absolutely discriminated against. And you know, we have problems because you're here, and it's like, we have problems because there's a whole range of issues why we have problems. But you know, but he ends up getting tired of the food stamps, he gets tired of the clothing vouchers, and he ends up being technically a drug dealer. He collects, and that's not great either, but he's also other things as well. So I mean, I think that when I wanted to write about whole people, I'm not interested to write about perfect human beings. It's boring, and there's no jeopardy around anybody who's perfect. There's nothing. And it helped me create jeopardy across the board, you know, fear across the board, things that people have to overcome, things the girls have to survive, and all of that stuff comes from the people around them. It comes from the flaws inside them as well. So you know, that's why I don't write people like perfect people. I've never written about a perfect person in my life. My next book, there's no perfect people in my next book.
Thank you.
But you know, who is a perfect person? You know, are you all perfect in this? We're not all perfect, but who wants to write about perfect people? Not me.
How long was this book in you, or did this flow as you were putting your characters? How did?
Well, when I
There's
first
so
wrote,
much passion there.
well, I first wrote Death of Bees, I only wrote about Marnie. Marnie was the only character I had in mind. I mean, the eulogy that you hear in the beginning, and today I buried my parents in the backyard, that was only ever Marnie's voice. And when I first wrote the book, it was chapters and chapters of Marnie speaking, and then I got bored of her. I got bored writing her. I thought, there is nothing to her without other voices. There is nothing but this absolutely die-hard, I am so troubled, I am so bewildered by the universe. And I thought, that's all very well, but something around her has to reflect that in a more subtle way, and there has to be other things in her universe, because what I was creating, or what I was writing at the time, just didn't work. It just didn't. It was like a blank canvas with just one colour on it, and it was just not working. So I binned all of that work. I threw it all away, and it was hard because it was like 12,000 words. And I started with her first. I started with her first words again, and I rewrote what I had written about the people in her life. And then I had other people speak, but I remember being quite huffy about it. I remember being quite huffy and cross, because I was like, I don't want to write other people into it, you know, how can I even start? I've got rid of all these words, and I was still quite very attached to them. I put them in the trash bucket, but I was still very attached to them. But then I thought, you know, let's have her sister speak. And then her sister spoke, and I didn't like how her sister sounded, because I was writing about two young girls and they were starting to sound the same. So I didn't want them to sound the same, so I introduced this idea that she had, you know, she had Asperger's, and she was therefore a vulnerable person, and that made Marnie vulnerable in a way, and then it started to get exciting again, and I started to think about, you know, being responsible for this young girl, and in a way this young girl being responsible for this older girl. And then I thought, you know, I need another voice here. I need another observer of the world, and it can't be these two girls. It has to be somebody watching these two girls. It has to be somebody with another take on their universes, something that those girls wouldn't have thought about in their own situation. And that's why I created Lenny. Lenny was the other eye on these girls. But I didn't want to write a boring character either in Lenny, so I had him, I had to write Lenny, and I remember going away and really thinking Lenny out, because Lenny is, I have an old man sitting there watching two people. It's just, so what, you know, what's his story, where's he been, where's he going, what does he want from this situation, why would anyone take in two girls unless they had something to gain from it, you know, and that's why I wrote Lenny, so he was my other eyes on the girls' own perception of their own universes, so